So guess what? We are almost done with Unit 1 notes. I know that I'm excited. So let's go ahead and look at the actual earth science part of these notes. So what is earth science? Well, in case you haven't figured it out already, it is a group of sciences that deals with Earth and its neighbors in space. Obviously, if you're studying earth science, you have to study the Earth. But another thing you have to know about is a little bit about outer space, because that is where the Earth is. That's something we don't really think about, but something like sunlight that provides us with day and photosynthesis for oxygen and energy and all that stuff. That is one of our neighbors in space. So we have to know about things like that in order to really understand the Earth. The other important thing to point out here is that earth science is a group of sciences. It is not just one. This is the only time, unless you fail, which none of you will, but this is the only time that you will actually take an earth science class. When you get to college, there is no earth science. You can take geology and biology and chemistry and oceanography and meteorology and all of those things. And paired together, that creates earth science. It is not a single class. I have not taken earth science since I was a freshman in high school. What I did have to do once I got to college is take a class in each of the group of the sciences in order to understand earth science as a whole. So it is a group of sciences. With the neighbors in space, that has to do with astronomy, which will actually be our Unit 2. So for those of you interested in space, we will spend a very brief time looking at that stuff. So moving on. So what is earth science? Don't need to write this down. But we're going to look at the structure of the Earth, the Earth's history, and the Earth and the solar system. So I want you to think to yourself and then share it with your table partner. What is a system? Y'all can talk about it in groups, and then you will share, but I'll let you go ahead and pause this video while you discuss what a system is. Okay, a system is the complicated definition is a group of interacting, interrelated, or interdependent elements forming a complex whole. So the only thing you need to write down is the bolded stuff. Remember, if it's not bolded, don't worry about writing it. So the simple definition of that is a group of parts that work together as a whole. The Earth has a whole bunch of different parts to it. We're going to look at not all of those, but most of those different parts. And we're going to see how they work together to create the system that is able to produce and to support life. But you've got a bunch of different things that all relate. So for the first part of earth science, we look at the actual Earth and we learn about those systems. In the second part of earth science, environmental, that is when we actually, because we have an understanding of those individual parts, we can look and see how they're related and how they create that whole, that very complex whole of the Earth, and how if you mess with one part of a system, you will indeed change the other part. Global warming is one example we're going to look at, seeing how if you change the carbon dioxide levels, you can start to change weather events and ocean currents and all sorts of stuff. So it is a complex whole. And this is important to view all science this way, because all science has a cause and effect. So let's continue. Key point. Remember, only write the bolded part. The Earth likes to be balanced. This is a key phrase that I will come around to a whole bunch. Even when I get back and we're looking at environmental stuff, I'm going to keep talking about how the Earth wants to be balanced. That is the whole, goal of the Earth, I guess you could say. The Earth wants to be balanced out. And so a lot of stuff we look at with ocean currents and whatnot, you're going to see how that is simply caused because the Earth is trying to balance itself. And as you finish writing that one sentence down, we can all admire the little alligator balancing, Cheerios on its head or something. Why these people have alligator, and then why they're balancing Cheerios on its head, and why the alligator is, posing and smiling for it, who knows? But I like the picture. So moving right along. Okay, take a second, and I'm just going to be quiet for a second, and I want you to talk about or think about to yourself silently a way that the Earth needs to be balanced, or how it actually goes about balancing itself out. So think about that independently. Okay, now that you have thought about it independently, in just a moment after the video is paused, I want you to discuss those ideas with your partner. And then after you have discussed it with your partner or your table, we will end up sharing those ideas with the class. So be thinking of some things. How can the earth be balanced? And then what are ways that it's trying to balance itself out with? So you can think of temperatures, you can think of winds, all sorts of stuff. So think about that, pause the video, and then y'all can have a nice class discussion. Okay, now that we know a little bit of the background of earth science, we're going to look at 4 branches that make up earth science. So one of the first slides we looked at said that earth science is a group of sciences. And these are the groups of the different sciences that are all fit together. So this is what we call the 4 main branches that create what earth science is. The first one is geology. So geology is the study of the forces that shape the earth. Geo means earth, and I do want you to write that down and make sure you know it. Prefixes are important in science. They can really help you remember stuff, and also they help you to figure things out if you just don't know what the answer is. If you can remember that geo means earth, then if you have a multiple choice question and you read that and you're like, I don't know what the heck this is talking about, but you know it has something to do with some structure of the earth, then probably an answer choice that has the word geo in it is going to be a good guess for you to put. So know your prefixes. It will help you make educated guesses on your test, and it will also just help you remember things in general. So geology are the study of forces that have shaped the earth, and these are very slow processes, okay? Extremely slow. We're looking at rocks, so you can see like my little cartoon down here. I thought it was funny. So one rock 14.5 billion years ago to the present day, and you can see like no changes. Geology is an extremely slow science. That doesn't mean it's not interesting. It just means that most of the processes occurring within it do take forever to actually occur. Some can be quick, like earthquakes and stuff, but the majority of them are very slow. So that's what we will look at in Unit 4, so you can eagerly await that. Our next branch of science is going to be, before we get there, think of some forces that change the earth. You have constructive forces, and then you have destructive forces. So just like constructive sounds, this is something that's being built. So if you are constructing a building, then you are building a building. So constructive forces are going to be forces within geology that are building things. And the most common example is going to be a mountain. So mountains are formations on the earth being built, aka being constructed. Therefore, they are called a constructive force. Now, you also have destructive forces within geology. And these are forces that will destroy parts of the earth. So just like you had mountains that were built up, those very mountains can be torn down. One slow way that those mountains can be torn down is through erosion and weathering, which you've probably talked about in middle school and have a little bit of familiarity with. So constructive and destructive forces, both parts of geology. We'll come back to all those later in Unit 4. But constructive builds, destructive destroys. You should be able to pretty much guess that. I'm going to move on because if you haven't written that down by now, write faster. Okay, next, our next branch is going to be oceanography. Just like it sounds, oceanography is the study of the ocean. Pretty much common sense. So I do have a little video to show you in just a moment, but meteorology is our next branch, and that is going to be the study of the conditions of the atmosphere. So we looked at geology, study the earth, oceanography, study the ocean, and meteorology, the study of the atmosphere. Oh, and then down here we have astronomy, the last one, which is the study of space. So if you watch the Weather Channel, you are watching a meteorologist. That's why they're called that, because they study meteorology. And yes, meteorology is a study of weather and climate, but what we're going to find out in Unit 3 is weather and climate all has to do with what's going on within the atmosphere itself. which is why we define meteorology this way. So oceanography, study the ocean; meteorology, the atmosphere, aka weather and climate; and astronomy, study of space. So I'm going to let you pause this video while we show you a really cool video of an octopus that is just showing you because it's cool for no other reason, and then we will continue on. So go ahead and pause this and switch to the octopus video. Okay, so those are all of our branches. Now we are going to do a little bit of brain break and a little bit of a quiz. So I'm going to skip this first question. If you want to tell your partner which branch you think will be the most interesting, do you think it will be when we study astronomy, meteorology, oceanography, or I forgot the last one, astronomy. So y'all can talk about that for like 2 seconds. And then which one do you think will be the most boring? None of them. Okay, so now we are going to do a quick quiz. So before you look at the question, around the room there is a letter A, B, C, and D posted up on the wall. So I want everybody to stand up, and we're going to pause the video and let you just flip through the different questions so you can quiz yourself. So here is your first question. The study of space is astrology, astronomy, geology, or meteorology. Walk to the corner that you think answers the question, and then pause the video. Okay, the correct answer is astronomy. Now, hopefully most of you wandered over that way. Some people get this one incorrect because they see an A and they just assume astrology. It says astronomy. Astrology is the study of like telling your future within the stars, stuff like that. Okay, that's not a real science. Astronomy is a real science. That's going to be the study of space. So let's go to our next question. Geo means A, life, B, rocks, C, weather, or D, earth. Go ahead and pause the video and then walk over to your answer. And your answer is D. If you walk to the D corner, you are correct. Rocks are a part of geology, but geo actually means earth, so that's why it's D. Next question. The formula for density is, and y'all can just look at those, but go to the correct corner and pause the video. The correct answer is C. Density is mass divided by volume. You can think about it as DMV, where you're all going to go sooner than later to get your license. And our very last question, latitude goes, and I'll let you choose your answer, A or B, and pause the video. Okay, latitude, the correct answer is A. Latitude goes north and south of the equator. Remember, you have the Earth, here's the equator. You travel north to draw your new line, or you travel south to draw your new line. It is not saying that you're drawing a line north and south. It's saying how you move in order to draw your next line. So that was our last little review question. A couple more things, and then we'll finish up notes. Excuse my little email thing that popped up. I don't know what button I hit, but here we have a beautiful picture of the Earth. And when you look at this Earth, you can see a couple different things about it. Well, one, here's North America. So that is where we are. You can see a couple of hurricanes within the ocean. So there's one right by Mexico. That's one hurricane. It looks like there may be one on the upper right side off the coast of Maine. But when you look at this picture, you can see the different systems that are interacting. You see liquid water in the ocean. You see the continent with the crust. You see the clouds, which would be within the atmosphere. So you can see all of those different things. So we are going to look at the 4 spheres of the Earth. The 4 spheres are the geosphere, hydrosphere, atmosphere, and biosphere. So again, only write down the bolded things at the bottom. We are going to look at each of these spheres individually, and most of them, you can probably guess what they are. So like geosphere, we know geo means earth. So the geosphere is the sphere that is going to have the earth. You could probably guess what hydro means. Hydro, maybe that makes you think of hydrate. That's water. Atmosphere, hopefully you've heard of that. And then biosphere. I don't know if you know what bio means, but bio means life. And that's something we're going to write down as we go. So the 4 spheres, geosphere, hydrosphere, atmosphere, and biosphere. I'm going to move on. We're going to look at each of these individually. So if you have not finished writing them all 4 down, then no worries. You'll be able to go back and finish that up as we go. So the first sphere we're going to look at is the first 2 spheres we're going to look at is our hydrosphere and our atmosphere. So hydro, just like it sounds, is water. So this is all of the water on the earth. It's going to be your oceans, your rivers, your streams, your lakes, groundwater. It's even going to be the water that is frozen in our ice caps and glaciers. And maybe you already knew this, maybe not, but 97% of the earth is salt water, or 97% of the water on the earth is salt water. One, the majority of the earth is all water. You can tell that when you look at a globe. But 2, the majority of that earth or that water is salt. That means we cannot drink it. If you were to drink a whole bunch of salt water, that would dehydrate you more than it would hydrate you, and that could kill you. Plus, it would taste really bad. 3% of our water is fresh water, so that means 3% of the water that's actually on the earth we could actually potentially drink. But really, and we'll find this out in another unit, it's less than 1% we can actually get to and consume. So less than 1% of the Earth's water we can actually use. So that's all within the hydrosphere. The atmosphere is the gases that surround the Earth. So we have different layers of the atmosphere, which we'll learn about, and you're probably already are familiar with. But all of the atmosphere is made up of different gases. When you look at the air around you, you probably don't see anything because it's clear, but the air around you is all different forms of gas molecules. And so when we look at the atmosphere, we can see how some of those different gases cause different things, and including weather and climate. And the atmosphere is what makes life possible on Earth. Because what's the most important gas in the atmosphere, at least to us? Oxygen. If you didn't have oxygen in the atmosphere, then we wouldn't be able to breathe, and that would be a very sad thing. So 2 more spheres. We have the geosphere. Remember, geo means earth, and sometimes your test, North Carolina, will put on your test lithosphere. Geosphere and lithosphere are the same thing, okay? For at least for the purposes of this class, they're the same thing. So if you ever hear geosphere, you think of the earth core mantle crust. And if you think lithosphere, think geosphere. Okay, same thing. So you have 3 parts, the core, the mantle, and the crust. And we will look at those 3 parts in more detail later. And our very last sphere is biosphere. And I do want you to write down the prefix. Bio means life. So when we're looking at the biosphere, we're looking at all of the living organisms on the earth. So we are a part of the biosphere because we are all living. The area around you is part of the atmosphere because it's air and it's gases. The ground you walk on, that's part of the geosphere. And I forgot the other sphere off the top of my head. But those are the 4 different spheres. And they all have the different parts. Oh, the water that you're drinking, that is part of the hydrosphere. Okay, and if it's raining or snowing or anything like that, that is part of the hydrosphere because, again, that has to do with water. Okay, and let's move on. So environmental science. This is simply the study of relationships with Earth and its organisms, or if you just want to write down human impact, I'm fine with that. Okay, so environmental science is really just human impact. We're going to look at what humans are doing to the earth and how we're impacting those different systems. So what is environmental science? Just write down human impact and you should be good on that. Remember, the earth is a system. You mess with one part, you mess with the rest of it. So us humans have a tendency to mess with parts, and that therefore will affect the other systems. And we will find out about that in a lot more detail later on. Just to show you a couple things we're going to talk about in environmental science, and or energy resources, so with renewable energy and non-renewable, or renewable resources and non-renewable resources. Don't write down the blue part, just write down the renewable. So we're going to look at renewable resources and non-renewable resources. That's all you need to write for this. So just this part and this part. Renewable resources are things that come back in a relatively short amount of time. Non-renewable resources take thousands and millions of years to come back. So realistically, non-renewable resources do come back. They just aren't going to come back within your lifetime. I know some of you may think you're going to live to be 2 million years old, but you're not. An example of this would be, of these resources, would be your gas, oil, and coal. Those are energy resources we call non-renewable, because once we use them all up, we will never see them again, because it will be a few million years before they come back. Renewable resources will be stuff like a tree, because you cut it down, and in a relatively short amount of time, 40, 50 years, you're going to have a new tree that you can use again. So that's the difference with renewable and non-renewable, and we'll look at those in a lot more detail later. Okay, what else are we going to look at? And this is the last slide, yay. We're going to look at natural hazards like flooding, droughts, and earthquakes. We're going to look at population growth, and basically to sum that up, the earth is growing like crazy with populations, and I have a really fun game for us to play whenever we get there, and I'll be back for that part. And then we're going to look at problems caused by people. Most common one, pollution, and then global warming. So if you just write down these main red, bold headings, then you should be good. And on that note, once you have all this down, we are done with our first unit, and we can now start reviewing and preparing for our test coming up. How exciting! I'm sure you all will do great. But make sure if you ever do have questions that a classmate or the teacher in the room can't answer, that you feel free to email me and contact me. I will do my best to get back with you as soon as I possibly can. And all materials that you need to study with are online. So there's no excuse. You have the teaching, you have the study guides, you have the notes, and you have my email too. So anyway, finish this up, and good luck on your test.